Well, thank you for joining us this morning. I'm Representative Chris Tuck, leader of the Alaska Independent Democratic Coalition. And as you can see, I am joined with members of the coalition to welcome our newest member of the Alaska Legislature, Representative Ivy Spohnholz. We all know that it'd be very difficult to fill Max Gruenberg's shoes. He was a legislative giant here in Alaska, and his impact on this institution is immeasurable. However, Representative Spohnholz is a uniquely gifted and talented Alaskan, and we are fortunate to have her join the Alaska Independent Democratic Coalition. Representative Spohnholz was sworn in by the Speaker last Thursday. We immediately put her to work on a budget floor session with lots of amendments that lasted to about 3:30 the very next morning. And I would guess that Representative Spohnholz had one of the hardest days imaginable, hardest first days that you can possibly ask for. But before I turn the podium over to Ivy, I want to just say a few things about the process. I want to thank the House Democrats from District 16 on bringing 3 fantastic names in front of the governor. We had Taylor Billsford and Kendra Kloster, and I want to thank them for having the courage to step up to also have a desire to represent 16. The 3 candidates were exceptionally qualified, and the governor had a very tough decision. I'm glad that he made his decision quickly so that we can get off and get off to a good start, keep things rolling, and have representation for District 16. And so I would like to turn the microphone over to their new representative, Ivy Spohnholz.
Thank you, Representative Tuck. You know, a month ago, I really could never have imagined that I would be here today, tasked with serving the people of House District 16 and the state of Alaska. But I'm extremely thankful for the opportunity and the faith placed in me by the House District 16 Democrats, the governor, and also my colleagues and members of the Alaska Independent Democratic Coalition. Last month's sudden and untimely death of Representative Gruenberg was a shock to everybody. He was my representative, and I've known him since I was a child. I can't ever imagine being able to fill it in his shoes. I could never do that, but I'll do my very best to serve the people of District 16. I especially want to thank Ted Madsen and Nikolai Bailey, who worked for Representative Gruenberg for years and who have agreed to stay on in the transition. I couldn't do this without them. They're helping me get up to speed very quickly and make the transition as seamless as possible. I also want to thank members of the Alaska Independent Democratic Coalition for their faith and trust. I've received such a warm welcome from them and have received a lot of support. I'm really excited to join this group of enthusiastic, hardworking people with great integrity. These men and women are working for the best interests of the people of Alaska, and I hope that I can contribute in a meaningful way. So I've already started my committee work. I had education yesterday and State Affairs Committee this morning. I'll also be serving on the House Special Committee on Military and Veterans Affairs. We all know that Alaska is facing some really monumental challenges right now. Our oil revenue has declined so sharply that there's tremendous pressure to reduce government spending and to raise additional revenues. I want to ensure you that my colleagues in the Alaska Independent Democratic Coalition and I are open to all solutions to solve our fiscal challenges. However, I also want to ensure that the path forward doesn't place undue burdens on our most vulnerable Alaskans, which include, our elders, our youth, and people with disabilities of all kinds. A fiscal solution must be responsible and fair. So, thank you.
And then it's been a tradition from Representative Max Gruenberg to, when we have a new member come to the legislature, to honor them and to share with them the rhinoceros pin. And the rhinoceros pin, here you go, is, according to Max, the rhinoceros is the only animal that the elephant is afraid of. And then also, just a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. Eleanor said that every woman in public life needs to develop skin as tough as a rhinoceros hide. So I think it's really appropriate. So welcome to the team. Really appreciate it. And I think the reason why I'm kind of nervous and I can't say Representative Spohnholz so clearly is because I'm worried about saying Ann Spohnholz because her mother and I served together with the Alaska Process Industry Careers Consortium, and there's a striking resemblance of the two of them, and so I'm trying to get the word Ivy out ahead of Spohnholz before Ann starts slipping out. So with that, we'd like to open it up to questions, and please state your name and affiliation for the record.
Shauna Crondall, Alaska Education Update. Representative Spohnholz, what are your aspirations for the Education Committee?
Well, since today is my 6th day, I should probably start by saying it's early for me to say what my aspirations are. I have a lot of homework to do. We went immediately into, a challenging bill review yesterday morning. I think that generally my goal is to ensure that every Alaskan can have access to a really high-quality public education and to maintain access to that throughout the state of Alaska. Alaska's a fantastic state because we've had a fantastic education system that provides opportunities for everyone to learn and to step up and step out of whatever their circumstances are, should they be willing to put in the hard work, and I want to ensure that we can continue that.
Becky Bohr with the Associated Press. Representative Tuck, we now have 2 budgets that have been passed. Can you speak to what the process is in terms of discussions with the Speaker, with the majority, to make clear what your caucus's desires are for the budget? And when we hear that all options are on the table, are they really? I mean, is there anything at this point that you see that would be unacceptable by way of revenue measures, without concessions on the budget?
Well, right now we are on the early stages. We're going to probably have a comfortable budget here real soon. We did meet with the co-chairs of finance on the House side, speaking to a lot of our concerns. A lot of the amendments that you heard on the floor were some of the concerns that we brought forward. We will be in talks more with them as well as the Speaker here very soon. I've had just some preliminary discussions with the Speaker, trying to figure out how everything's going to get mapped out here in the end. We're all still not sure how that's going to be formulated, but we kind of see a picture around the corner. And I do need to have more conversations with the Senate leadership. And now that they got the budget through, I think it's time to have those conversations, and I hope we can all get in the same room and have the dialogue necessary so we can come up with not only with a budget that Alaskans will be proud of, but ways that we can fund that budget as well.
Anybody else?
Liz Raines with KTV, also for Rep. Tuck. When we hit the 45-day mark, I asked you about progress during the session, and you'd mentioned that you wanted all of the governor's tax bills to be vetted and work through the legislative process. And you said that you'd push to stay here longer than 90 days if it took that. Is that still the case?
That is still the case. We do have movement. We have the tax credit bill. We had public testimony on that last night, on the oil tax credit bill. We're looking to see other movements of bills coming forward. And so, yeah, we're looking at the governor's plan right now as the structure. How that shapes up is still yet to be determined, but we're looking forward to having fiscal solutions this year. And I think it's still time to do it. There's no reason why we couldn't.
Justin Baird from Channel 2. So what do you see as maybe the biggest challenge or the in terms of what's already been passed through the House and Senate, what's the most difficult piece for you to accept in terms of cuts or how the budget is shaped up so far?
Well, this budget's going to impact many lives. And so when we look at all the things that we're considering, of course, there are amendments discuss that, and Representative Spohnholz pointed that out, is the less fortunate, the disabled, our children, our future generations, and our seniors. So we're looking at all those aspects right now. To say that one is more important than the other when I see them as equally important to making sure that we keep providing education opportunities and job opportunities and good lifestyles here for Alaskans.
How much of how much of those changes do you think you'll be able to fight back in terms, get back into the budget in the coming weeks?
Well, we're hopeful. We did a very good job last year at protecting those same subjects and those same issues. And so we're hoping to have this done a little bit earlier than we are right now, making sure this stuff is into the budget. Pre-K being one of those. We hate to see that pre-K has been eliminated on both sides of the legislature. So those are some of the things that we're going to be discussing, some of the things that we're going to be standing strong in protecting. Yes.
I'd like to add a little something to that. I think that as the newest person in the year, in office and in the room here, one of the challenges for me in terms of stomaching some of the cuts that we've looked at is that the budget also included some mega projects that we don't really have a plan for developing, and some large projects which the community doesn't support. So in my district, in sort of the neighboring community around my district, a great example would be the Braga extension. None of the community councils want it. So most of the people in the community don't want it, and yet we spent, I think, $39 million on that the other night, and then had to make cuts to the most vulnerable amongst us, and that was pretty hard for me to stomach, as a new person coming in.
Yes.
For Representative Josephson on the tax credit bill, as you're looking at that and having heard testimony, what do you think is the appropriate balance between addressing something that's become a major budget item, but also keep being mindful of what you've heard from industry about the impacts that changes could have on their activities?
Well, my response to that is, I told, yesterday I was interviewed by Steve Quinn of the Petroleum News, and I said that I thought, in some regards, everyone who testified was right. That is, I take the industry's motivations and passion at face value, and I don't doubt that if credits are cut back, it has some impact. I mean, by definition, it does. However, the projected amount of these credits is $700 million. That's the numerator. The denominator of new income, setting aside the earnings reserve, is 1.8 billion. So the fraction is 7 over 18, essentially. And we can't sustain that. That's in effect saying we're going to spend more than a third of new income on credits. The evidence is that in the Cook Inlet, there is gas behind the pipe ready to go and contracted through 2023. And then there's proven reserves beyond that. They have no tax. They have the benefit of sometimes as high as 65 cents on the dollar for their exploration and development costs. So it is a serious subsidizing of the industry, and it's currently unaffordable. It may have been affordable when we took in under ACEs in high profit years, 10, 11, 12, $10 billion. Perhaps in that circumstance it was affordable, but it's simply not affordable anymore. And then there are different problems, I think, on the North Slope, where you see, for example, because of the stacking of credits, the net operating loss, the gross value reduction, that we're paying more than 100 cents on the dollar. In other words, we're covering all their costs and giving them a profit just because. And, I think I speak for the caucus pretty well on this, that this has to be reformed. It's not fair to go to 730,000 people and say, you need to absorb a dividend cut because we've got to pay $700 million in tax credits, which, by the way, Cook Inlet, it has proven to be results-oriented. That is, it's gotten us results. But I think in a number of circumstances, it's very unclear what we're getting for this investment. Any additional questions?
It's over here in the corner.
Jeremy Shea with KTO on 360 North. Just big picture wise, with the budget process that we've adopted this year of getting the budget out of the way and setting everything else aside, what's kind of the reaction been for some of the members on Finance Committee, and some of the members who aren't serving maybe in a finance position?
Jeremy, restate the question, please.
What's your assessment of this budget first approach this year?
Well, I think it shows that no matter what we raise in revenue, the Republicans had a certain amount of cuts they wanted to make. So there's a disconnect. Some people in the public think, well, if you raise revenue, you don't have to cut services for people with disabilities. I believe you don't have to cut services for people who face the challenge of disabilities. But I guess the message is they're going to face cuts no matter what revenue comes in. The public would think, well, you see what kind of revenue you can raise, and you see if you have to make those cuts. There has been a process that has, our view is you cut waste. Many of us supported $700 million worth of cuts last year. We had to do it. And I think we all support something in the area of the governor's proposed $100 million of cuts. But when you start cutting things that aren't waste, when you start cutting a lift that helps a person with a disability get into a shower, when you start cutting a lift that helps somebody with a disability get into their house, when you cut the ability of somebody who faces a disability to live in a group home so that now maybe they have to go live in an institution, you've gone way beyond a reasonable cut. And now you're cutting the things the public doesn't support and that we think are wrong. At some point you go a cut too far when you start hitting opportunity, when you start hitting seniors, when you start hitting people facing disabilities, and those are the kinds of things that we're going to battle back on.
I guess maybe I wasn't clear with my question. It was more, do you like dealing with the budget, having all the focus on the budget right out the gate, and not having the distractions of all the other bills, or not?
You know, I think we're all intelligent people. I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And so I think we can figure out how to deal with our fiscal gap at the same time we can figure out what cuts are appropriate and what cuts are not appropriate. For many of the committees just sort of sat idle while the Finance Committee was looking at the budget. But look, I mean, that's water under the bridge. We have 40 days to move forward. Let's move forward. Let's come up with a plan that is fair to Alaskans, and let's start reversing some of these cuts that are not cuts to waste, but are cuts to human dignity, cuts to the ability for people to live a decent life.
And on that process, we've been trying to get a overview of what our budget, our fiscal situation should look like. And when we look at a fiscal plan, it's expenditures and revenue. And so we propose a Ways and Means Committee as a way of looking at all those elements and see how it fits together. And we also offered a caucus of the whole so we can all get together and discuss it. But when things are compartmentalized and things are divided up in committees, it's really hard to see the big picture of things. And by itself, a lot of these things may fail, and that's what we don't want to see. We want to see a big picture approach to solving the fiscal situation.
Chris,
I'll
can
give
I
you a slightly different, another take on that, which is an example of where we are challenged now because of the delay. The Omnibus Crime Bill, which is a real bipartisan effort, there's a recognition of how much we're spending on corrections, how much we're spending on law enforcement. How can we try to improve public safety and also save costs? It's a 90-page bill. There's a version in the House. There's a version in the Senate. We started having hearings on it yesterday in the Judiciary Committee. And that's something because of the holdup. We haven't had any hearings in the Judiciary Committee for more than a month. And that's the exact kind of bill that to actually come together and get both Republicans and Democrats and independents to work together on that bill, which will actually save us money as a state. We'll need time. We're going to do our best to get it done in the 90 days. But it's a perfect example of something that's going to take a lot of time, and that the additional time would have helped us. But this is where we are, and I think everyone else here in the room is exactly right. This is where we are. Let's move forward. Let's get it done.
Oh, sorry, the mic's over here. Sorry. No. Sorry about that.
Nat Hers, Alaska Dispatch News. I guess just to follow up on that, you guys had these ideas, the caucus of the whole, the Ways and Means Committee. Those were floated early on in the process and have not been adopted. Now that there's only 35 days left, is that right? 35 days. I mean, do you guys, how are you guys going to try to influence this process going forward, given that, it seems like whether those ideas had merit or not, they're kind of gone by the wayside at this point?
Well, our Constitution requires us to work together if there's any need to draw into the Constitutional Budget Reserve. And so they're going to have to work with us. If they want to go around us, then really it's them solving the problem on their own. But we want to be part of the solution. We want to share the burden, and we want to share the responsibility. And so that's the reason why we offered those two ways of sharing the burdens and responsibility. It's really up to them whether they adopt it or not, and it's really up to them if they include us. But I think if we don't start having stakeholder buy-in, if we don't have the dialogue going now, then we may end up in another situation that we did last year, and that's what we're trying to prevent. We're trying to prevent a 53-day extended sessions.
And then I was just going to follow up, Representative Spohnholz. I was just curious, like, you know, so it's I think it's too late for you to introduce any bills at this point. So, you know, how do you envision spending your next month here?
Well, you don't need to introduce bills to make a difference in the legislature, and I have already started considering bills that are coming for committees. Yesterday, we had a very interesting bill that came over from the Senate to the Education Committee, which we had a lot of questions on, and so I'm going to be spending a lot of time digging into the issues and learning a little bit more about education and the important business of the legislature. I'm also going to be learning a lot more about the budget, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for somebody with a fresh perspective to come in and add value to the conversation. So.
And are you going to be, like, what's your level of engagement with Representative Greenberg's bills?
Oh, sure. Because I serve on State Affairs Committee, which actually has taken the reins of sponsoring at least one of Representative Greenberg's bills, the Transfer on Death bill. I'm pretty actively engaged in those discussions. So I think that it's that the bills that he had introduced were good bills that have pretty broad support. He had another bill that also has been picked up by Representative Vasquez, I believe, and has pretty broad support. And so I'm excited to be able to co-sponsor and help advance those.
Andrew
Kitchen and Alaska Public Radio Network. The Senate passed $100 million in unallocated executive branch-wide cuts yesterday. It was opposed by the minority. Senator Kelly said that basically the structural reforms that are talking about could amount to that number. What are your thoughts on that approach?
That's kind of a lazy approach in doing the budget. Just to do blanket cuts like that really is it's just passing the responsibility on to somebody else. And I don't think the governor's going to accept that. He accepted it under certain conditions last year, but just to say, hey, you know, just to blanket cut this, blanket cut that, really isn't looking at the importance of the budget and what the budget actually can do for you. Yes?
I think also that it's sort of an example of how the way that we've restructured the process this year, so that we're looking at budget first and committee work second, causes challenges. If we were doing committee work congruently, we could have probably identified some constructive areas that we could reduce costs that would be specific and would have worked through the legislative process. And so I think it's probably an example of how using a more traditional process might have actually informed the budget process more usefully.
And Representative Gara.
Andrew, I'm going to give the Senate both a passing grade and a failing grade on what they passed. The passing grade comes in that their budget is more transparent and understandable. It's all funded by the general fund. There are no special funds that are being used, no last year's funds for next year's budget. So that part is cleaner. $100 million of unallocated cuts, that sounds like sort of Aramaic to the public. Nobody knows what that means. But what they did was they said, Governor, we can't find any waste in the budget. You go do it, and you go take the blame. So here's $100 million of more cuts. Whether you take it out on people with disabilities, whether you take it out on seniors, whether you take it out on education, whether you take it out on opportunity, you go do that and you bear the blame. That's the problem with unallocated cuts. It means that the legislators weren't able to find relevant, useful cuts that made sense. And now the governor's told to go cut who knows what. And we already have too many cuts to those facing disabilities. We already have too much damage, I think, to opportunity for children in the state. We already have too poor of an approach towards children who face abuse in life. And those things are already bad enough. The danger is that the governor, not knowing where to find $100 million more of cuts, might start cutting the things that damage people's lives more than they already are.
I do have a quick question on the pre-K grants. We heard on the Senate floor yesterday that it's $2 million for a handful of grants. And this is something for the last few years that it's been in and then it's been out, and then it's been in and then it's been out. And there's been this fight over it. I guess I'm just wondering, do you see a way that a proposal, or would you envision a proposal to make this program more universal, more helpful, more, I guess, indisposable, if that's the goal, than this every year in and out, and a program that's kind of on the bubble?
Yeah, this would start off as a pilot program. We're beyond the pilot program right now, but there's those in the legislature that still want to make it a pilot program. And it actually needs to be expanded to one of the tools in the toolboxes that districts can utilize. We have, of course, we have Best Beginnings, we have Parents as Teachers as well. But those are 3 items that school districts should be able to choose from based on their unique needs and their desires throughout the state of Alaska. And so we've had successes in that. We don't want to turn into one of the 10 states in America that does not have a viable pre-K program. This is something that we're going to be standing strong on. This is something very important to us. And this is something that saves us money down the road. Bang for the buck, dollar-wise, a dollar spent in pre-K saves you so much more money in your education dollars down the road. And if you can discover learning disabilities from children early on in their life, you have better successes in overcoming those disabilities, as well as when children fall into remediation programs because they weren't fully prepared to enter the K through 12 system, then those are costly programs, and once they fall into them, it's hard to get them back out. So this is a good investment for us.
If I could, on pre-K, a number of school districts do have early intervention programs for 3-year-olds, but the only way the school district is going to discover that is if those parents bring those kids in early. Parents who may not have the educational background or the knowledge of what is available at their school districts will not bring their kids to school until they have to, until kindergarten. You've lost 2 years. Preschool teachers all the time discover kids with learning disabilities and send those kids and their parents to the school district that is not only funded to take care of learning disabled preschoolers, but are required to do it. However, they can't find those kids by themselves. And high quality early intervention preschool programs help school districts identify those kids and help those parents and families do the right job for those kids. If you don't, you've lost 2 years, and that's a hell of a long time when you're 5.
Chris, can I add something to what Les said earlier?
Just go ahead, Representative Josephson.
I think it was Becky, but it was Andrew, talking about the Senate budget and the $100 million unallocated cuts. One of the criticisms leveled against the governor's tax plan or revenue plan has been that he has not modeled the economic impacts to the panoply of things he's sort of targeted on those industries. And that's been a criticism I've heard 10 times in committee sessions. I think the same criticism could be made about some of these cuts. I mean, Gunnar Knapp, one of the leading economists, tells us that if you cut $300 million, 4,500 people will lose their jobs. Now, we can identify some of them because we see the governmental institutions that are cut. But I think the majority needs to let the Alaska people know who in the private sector will lose their jobs. I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about needlessly contributing to a recession.
And that looks like that's our half hour. I want to thank you guys for joining us today and look forward to seeing you in our next press availability.